recording. So I would like to say good afternoon to everybody, to all of you, and to thank you for joining today's webinar entitled Flourishing Students, the Role of Higher Education Institutions in Promoting Well-Being. I'm Virginia Klimukienė, or international I may be called Virginia, and I'm the head of Counseling and Training Center at Vilnius University, Lithuania, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this webinar today. The webinar will be held in English with the translation to Lithuanian. So I would like to say to point some organizational aspects in my native language, and also I would like to invite you to stay in English channel. If you see this small globe down your screens, so you choose English channels in order not to listen to Lithuanian translation. Taigi, laba diena, ačiū, kad prisijungėte į webinarą pavadinimu Klestinti studentai. Pavadinimu Klestinti studentai, aukštųjų mokyklų vaidmuo stiprinant gerovę. Mano vardas jau prisistačiau, esu Virginija Klimukienė, Vilniaus universiteto konsultavimo ir mokymo centro vadovė. Ir moderuosiu šios dienos webinarą. Webinaras vyks anglų kalba, tačiau sinchroninį vertimą į lietuvių kalbą jūs galite girdėti pasirinkę kanalą, tai yra gaubliuką apačioje, ir pasirinkę lietuvišką kanalą. Ir taigi, jeigu norite negirdėti angliško teksto fone, tai jūs turite pasirinkti mute original audio. Jeigu norite girdėti tekstą originalų fone, tai tada turite šitos funkcijos nepasirinkti. Ir toliau aš kalbėsiu angliškai. So I'm back to English now. And I would like to say that today's webinar is organized within the framework of the project of the Erasmus Plus project, enabling mental health benefits, resilience, achievement, competences, and engagement in improved higher education policy and practice for student well-being. This project, as we already mentioned, started in December 2019, just before the COVID-19 pandemic. And the project is aimed at mobilizing partners from Birmingham City University from United Kingdom, University of Crete from Greece, Navarra University from Spain, also Balkan Institute from Serbia, and our Vilnius University to focus upon the ongoing problems for all higher education settings. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I will make the title of the webinar visible, and also would like to say that together with our partner organizations, we work together and created tools to help the staff better address mental health and well-being issues in student populations. During the 3 years of the project, we have identified mental health, academic, financial, as well as social inclusion or identity challenges that negatively affect student well-being. We also selected the best practices implemented in Europe and overseas and compiled them into different toolkits, which can be found at our website, the website of our project, www.embracehe.org. So you can see the link to the website on your screens. And I would really encourage you to visit the project website if you have not visited it before. Flourishing students, that is the main focus of today's talk. The studies show the increasing levels of stress and anxiety among students of higher education. The constant experience of stress causes mental health problems, drug or alcohol misuse, even the suicide attempts. Therefore, on one hand, we could dig deeper and explore what is going on with these young people. We can investigate what challenge the university life provides for them. And here we could find not only studies and exam-related issues, but also separation from parents and individuation process, difficulties in personal and intimate relationships, financial issues and challenges in work and studies balance. Therefore, we can see the reciprocal relationship between well-being and studies. So we can say that the learning process affects student well-being and vice versa. The well-being affects the student's ability to learn. On the other hand, we can discuss how we as workers of higher education institutions can support students to thrive not only academically, but in all aspects of their functioning, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Shall we discuss if it is a university concern to take care of students' well-being? Most probably, we all agree that it is not about the answer of yes or no, but rather the questions that to what extent should the higher education institution address the mental health issues of students? What spectrum of services they should provide, and whether their role in promoting well-being is among the criteria for students to select higher education institution for their studies. Today's webinar will provide the room for discussing these issues. Now, I would like to present the webinar agenda of today. So, and first of all, let me take a moment to say thank you for the Education USA office in Lithuania, and particularly to Mrs. Renata Zhukovska, the accredited consultant of Education USA, who did a really great job and helped us in making this beautiful webinars program. So we are very delighted to have all the speakers of today's webinar who will present the role of their higher education institution in promoting students' well-being. We believe that these talks will complement and expand the knowledge provided in toolkits of our project. Thus, will help all of us to assemble the picture how many different aspects of students' well-being exist and how creatively and effectively they can be addressed by higher education institutions. At the end of the webinar, we will have some time for answers to your questions. So my colleague, Dr. Ksenia Chnichina, will moderate this part of the webinar. And you are really encouraged to submit your questions anytime during the webinar in the chat box. I think we all already learned how to use the Zoom and where the chat box is. So you can also include, indicate which presenter you would like to address with your question. Or maybe you would like to hear the answer to your question from all three speakers. And finally, I would like to mention that the webinar is recorded. The record will be sent to each of the participants by email. So you could come back to any part of the webinar anytime when you need it. Also, we are going to place the record to the website of our project, so that it would be also available for those who unfortunately were not able to attend the webinar, but are really interested in this topic. So it is my pleasure to invite the first speaker, Dr. Irene Kriegel, who is the director of Center for Counseling and Wellness at Calvin University, Michigan. Her talk will be on collaborative framework for holistic student wellness. So, Dr. Irene, please.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here this morning for me. I recognize it's not morning for everybody, but thank you for this invitation. It's an honor to share this work with all of you. And nice to meet my fellow presenters as well. David, I looked into a job position at your college just because I think you said there was a popcorn machine available for staff. Was that you maybe?
There is, yes.
Yes, yes. So it's an honor to meet you. So I am here to share a bit about the work at Calvin University. I will share my screen here. Okay, let me know if there are any issues with seeing it. But first of all, I just want to acknowledge that we all do this work in difficult circumstances, but certainly those of you in Lithuania and Europe in general are under incredible stress right now. So I just want to acknowledge that and let you all know that you are in our hearts and prayers and thoughts during this time. And certainly that the experiences of your region are adding a whole other level of stress for students. In what is already a very stressful time of life for many people going through the university years. Here at Calvin University, we are located in a mid-size city in the state of Michigan, right in the central part of the United States, the Midwest. We have about 3,200 students. We are a faith-based university, which certainly adds a particular culture and language to the work that we do. And we sometimes in this field, we talk about high touch versus low touch campuses in terms of how much is expected of staff and faculty as they walk alongside students. I would describe Calvin University as a high touch institution where there really is a lot of expectation from students and from the campus as a whole, that students are very well supported along the way. So that's a little bit of the context of where I'm speaking to you from. Like you, I suspect that we've all been noticing some trends in the world of mental health. I do not, first of all, I don't know if you all can see all of this. Let me just see if I can hide this panel. Okay, I can see it a little better now. So I don't expect you to read all of the numbers and words on this chart, but this was my attempt recently just to show some of the trends over the last 5 years that we've seen at our counseling center. So these are a few of the numbers that we pull from the CCAPS, which is a measure we use here in the university counseling center context, specifically for clients who come to see us. So students who come to see us are asked over the previous 2 weeks and also over the course of their lives, a variety of questions. So, and actually this is not all from the CCAPS. This is partially from the CCAPS, partially from a longer intake form that we use. I've used these numbers lately with our own internal constituency, partially to show concerning trends and also to balance out some of the crisis narrative that sometimes can be prominent in our field about mental health. To recognize that even during the pandemic, we have not necessarily seen drastic increases in every area of mental health concern for students. Some of the biggest jumps during the pandemic, interestingly here in our context, had to do with body image. Students more concerned about eating and weight than in the past. We can imagine that might have to do something with all that time spent on social media during times of isolation, looking at photos, who knows, more food available, but there seemed to have been increased anxiety in that area for our students. And certainly we are concerned about these ongoing trends in the areas of suicidality and self-injurious behavior. So you can see those last couple categories there. About 13% of the students recently who have been coming into our center have been reporting that very recently, within the previous 2 weeks, they had been experiencing suicidal thoughts. And anxiety levels, of course, continue to increase as well. This is when we ask students about the course of their life. So, again, they're coming to us at the time of intake. And so here we're asking in your whole life about a number of different factors. So here we see that about 35% of students who come to our counseling center are saying that in the course of their life, they have considered suicide, and a full 9% of those students reporting that there was some attempt to take their life. And so these are, of course, trends that we're concerned about. we do see that students reporting trauma, sexual trauma in particular, and other types of harassment and abuse does continue to be quite high. And so this speaks both to some of the societal concerns we have about safety and wellness and well-being, how we are all being treated in society, but also interestingly how students are increasingly talking about these experiences and able to put some language on that. These are numbers not from my own counseling center, but from our health services department. We work quite closely in collaboration with them, although we're not integrated together, but they're really important partners for us. And they've highlighted some pretty interesting stats as they look over the past several years of what's changed in that health context. So you can see back in 2015, depression and anxiety was making the list of the top 8 concerns that students were coming in with. But it was all the way down at number 7 in terms of prevalence. By 2018, depression and anxiety had risen to the number 1 concern that students were identifying as they came into health services. In 2021, of course, COVID rose to the top, or suspected COVID, but other than that, depression and anxiety remained right there at the top of the list. These are raw numbers that you're seeing. Interestingly, our enrollment has actually declined a bit since 2018, so that makes it even more alarming that depression and anxiety is at such a high when it comes to concerns. My understanding is that previous to COVID, really about 40% of the visits to health services had to do with depression and anxiety or some type of mental health. Also, an increase in the number of students who are coming into the university context already on medication. So at the time that they enrolled, students saying increasingly that they were taking medication for depression and anxiety. The number of students taking medication for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or even antipsychotic medications, those have risen slightly, gone up and down a bit. And again, I think it's helpful to notice that there are increases in mental health concerns. And then there are also some ways that these lines go up and down, but don't always spike in the way that we might assume that they do. So that's just a really quick overview. I would love to hear more what you all are seeing in your context, but I know that may need to be for another time. But I'm mostly here to share with you how Calvin has approached mental health care within our context. And I would say that the biggest descriptor of how we try to approach it is holistically. I'm going to very quickly run through some of the other departments at Calvin that we collaborate with. And then I'll be spending a little more time with a deeper dive into how we at the Counseling Center are working with mental health. We have many, many partners on campus. So we consider the Center for Student Success to be one of our primary connectors here. This is an office that's working specifically around academics. So helping students with study skills, helping them learn to organize, to manage time, things that we can all use help with on a regular basis, but certainly students are needing these basic skills to be functional in the academic setting. They offer tutoring, they offer different accommodations for both physical and mental challenges that students might be experiencing. So we refer often back and forth with student success. As I mentioned, we are a faith-based institution, which means that we have a vibrant campus ministries department. Not all students who come to our university identify faith as an important part of their life. If they do, and if they find that to be a useful component of their own coping strategy and mental health, then we often work hand in hand with campus ministries in terms of other types of counseling and support that are available on campus. Our Career Center is a really important place for students to explore maybe anxiety or just feelings that they have about their vocational path, their career path. If a student comes to us at the Counseling Center and says, I'm just so anxious because I don't know what to major in, or I don't know what to do with my life, then we want to make sure that we are tapping in with our Career Center across campus for support for those students. The Center for Intercultural Student Development is a very crucial place of support and thriving for students of all races and ethnicities, but particularly students who have minority status of some sort. And we certainly know here in the United States, we've had many concerns even recently with racial trauma, with race-based harassment. And even here in our own city of Grand Rapids, we've very recently had a killing of a young Black man who, and this was really a traumatic experience for all of us in the area. And so we want to make sure that our Center for Intercultural Student Development isn't carrying all of that challenge of supporting students around those issues, but certainly we consider them to be very crucial partners for us at the Counseling Center, and we do collaborate with them very directly. We have a mentoring program. A lot of what we do at the Counseling Center, because of the demand for mental health services, the students are more and more looking for counseling where, as stigma comes down over time, in our context here, we find students are more likely to ask for counseling, which is great. It also means that we don't have the capacity as we might have in the past to offer unlimited weekly individual counseling to every student that would like it. So we've tried to partner more directly with things like our mentoring program, where a student may be looking less for clinical treatment and more for somebody who's maybe a little bit farther down the road in life, who can share experiences, who can listen, who can help them set some goals and work towards that. So we consider that to be a key partner. We know that movement and exercise are crucial for wellness. Myself, I'm trying to get back on my bike for my commute to work and back as of this week, as the weather gets warmer here where I am in Michigan. And so we know that students really benefit from those opportunities to exercise. And so we do partner directly with group fitness programs on our campus. And then specifically here in the United States, we have plenty of continually changing, evolving laws around sexual assault response and support on campuses. It's very complicated, but when it comes down to the actual student experience, we want students not to feel overwhelmed by all of that legal landscape and to know that they have a person or a group of people that can help them if they experience a sexual assault or really any kind of harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and other gender-based concerns as well. So even, recognizing that if there's anything that comes up for a student around identifiers such as gender or race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that students feel cared for and well supported and protected on our campus. And then connected to that, we do have a specific office on campus that's supporting and advocating for and being allies for LGBTQ plus students on our campus. And so we actually have a few different components of this. There is a group that meets outside of the counseling center called Saga. The campus is actively wanting to provide presentations and programming for students around sexuality, but then just also recognizing that in our context, sometimes LGBTQ students are feeling particularly on the margins or unsafe emotionally. So making sure that every student gets that kind of one-on-one support as needed as well, not just through our office. We always highlight campus safety partially because they help with our emergency assistance for students, even around mental health. Other directors here will know that managing crises in the mental health world is one of the challenges in the college and university context. And I'm very grateful for my partners in campus safety and also Residence Life too, for the ways that we all partner together in managing things that come up. So Residence Life does actually have a Res Life on-call social worker position, which is something new that we've been trying over the last couple of years. And so we know campus safety is 24/7 ready to show up for emergencies. They don't always come in with maybe the level of mental health expertise or that soft touch that we're looking for in a mental health crisis in particular. And we also know that seeing someone in uniform can actually be quite distressing for some students. So because of that, we really have campus safety and residence life social workers working hand in hand when there's a mental health concern, particularly outside of our own office hours at the counseling center. Health services, I already mentioned, is on campus providing medications as needed for students, helping with suicide risk assessments, etc. So that brings us to the Center for Counseling and Wellness. So this is where I'm the director. So here, the reason I take time to mention all those partners is because we know that we cannot do mental health on our own at the counseling center here. I think in the past, there was an expectation on our counseling center that we meet all the mental health needs of the campus. That was how we talked about it when I started here 13 years ago. And not surprisingly, we burnt out pretty intensely thinking that we could meet all the mental health needs of the campus. And so what we've done over time is increased collaboration, increased this type of holistic thinking so that we are collaborating with all of these partners on campus. And I could mention many more, even our faculty and staff who are here to teach academic classes really are core to emotional support for students. Because oftentimes a student that emotion might come out with a professor as they're concerned about a test that they failed or a paper that they're not sure how to finish. Students more and more often email professors with a lot of detail about their mental health difficulties. And so even working with staff and professors has become really crucial for us as a counseling center. And it's not just on-campus collaboration, it's also off-campus collaboration. We are fortunate to be in a city that has many therapists, many mental health providers that are quite eager to work with our students. And some of them are in walking distance right across the street from my office here. So more and more we are seeing success, not so much as seeing more and more of our own students, but more as collaborating more and more effectively with other resources on and off campus. So we call this a stepped care model. This is not a concept that we came up with at Calvin. There are many institutions that have implemented something along these lines, stepped care 2.0 it's called at times. But I don't expect you to absorb all of the words on this diagram. This is more just a chance to visually get a picture for how we think about this holistic collaborative approach to mental health care. I often say we at the counseling center, we don't own mental health on this campus. We don't have the corner on the market. And we know that when students come to us, that's just one piece of what they're doing with their day, with their week, with their month, with their life, right? So much like when I go to my physician for care, a lot of what happens in that appointment is my physician trying to encourage me to practice healthy habits outside of his office. So if we go back to exercise, every time I go to the doctor, he says, "So Irene, how are you doing with that exercise?" And I always say, "Well, not too great." And he says, "Well, we're going to get on you about that, right?" So hence, again, I'm on my bike again this week, so he'll be happy to hear that. But it's not that he's doing something magical in his office to make me physically healthy. It's that he's encouraging me in this holistic way throughout my whole life to practice habits of physical wellness. And this is much how we think about mental health here in our office. We consider ourselves to be a really important point of treatment for students, and also encouraging them to connect holistically with the rest of their lives in ways that support mental wellness. So when a student comes to us at the counseling center, we always begin with a screening for them, and that is pretty comprehensive. So we ask them a lot of questions right up front when they come to our office. We have a very comprehensive intake form that they're filling out. Some of them hate it, some of them love it. Some students say that was like therapy, just filling that out. Others see it as a bit of a barrier to get in our office because they have to fill out this big form. So every year we're kind of evaluating if it's still worth it. But what we find is that asking in-depth information as students come in about their mental health, their family history, their medical history, many other things, that helps that screening clinician to make really solid recommendations based on this step care model that you see here. And you'll notice that individual therapy is actually quite high on this model. I should clarify, we're not asking students to do these steps starting with 1 and going through 10. That's not the idea. It's a little bit more like a mix and match approach, or a buffet, you might call it, where the counselor is collaboratively working with the student during that screening to explore which blend of these services might be the most useful. What will be the most effective for a student to experience symptom relief moving forward. And our goal is to maximize a student's use of their strengths and their resources that are existing, and not feel like not assume they need the most intensive level of treatment, but not to prescribe, but to collaboratively plan together on what we think might be the most effective. So you'll see they might be connected with other campus supports, such as what I just described. They might be connected to other peer supports. We do utilize right now an anonymous peer support app that students can use to support each other on our campus, but also other ways that they might engage with other students for that kind of support. They might engage with different self-help resources that we have, whether that's an online digital resource, or our wellness room that's down the hall. They can use our massage chair there if they would like, or we have a Lightbox lending program, etc. It might be that they come to one of our workshops or some of our programs where they're really learning specific coping skills around managing depression and anxiety. Or it might be that they do come back and see us individually, so we can do that as a therapeutic consultation if it seems that the student is just needing 1 or maybe 2 sessions to work through a very specific problem. But otherwise, one of our primary forms of treatment is group therapy. It's quite hard to talk students into attending group therapy. On the other hand, when they go, the outcomes are very strong. We find that the learning outcomes are strong, and also the satisfaction is very high for students that are willing to engage in that. We do have forms of online therapy that are almost like coaching that can be prescribed for students. And then there are students who are in need of more ongoing individual therapy because their symptom severity requires that, or perhaps they've had traumatic experiences that they're needing to work through in order to be functional in the university context. We do at that point require a full diagnostic assessment. And so in the past, we would have started with a diagnostic assessment for every student who came through our office. And we've made the choice to reserve that for students that are going into a more expected longer term course of treatment. And then having students referred off campus is right there on our within our model as well. And we keep a digital resource of local providers for that as well. So that's a little bit of an overview. I'm just about at my time here. So one of the ways that we do try to make sure that students have access to that wide range of different resources is by trying to keep our website stocked with this information. I will say it's a complicated model. And I know you can all understand this because I was able to see a bit of the good work that you all have been doing over the last 3 years. And I was encouraged to see a similar complexity there, right? Like recognizing that we need all these different types of services and specialties involved in supporting students well. So we try to put a lot of this information right on our website, mostly so that students can really dive in and be able to get an idea of where they feel the most comfortable starting. We try our messaging to students as much as possible is to try to invite them to come to us for anything at any time for that screening appointment. And then we would love to be a connector for them on and off campus. And that is a little bit of a challenging narrative at times because students would love to just be able to know they can come to us for everything. And as I said at the beginning, that used to be our goal, was to meet all the mental health needs of the whole campus. And we've had to acknowledge we are human beings with limits, that can't always do everything. But we want students to always feel warmly welcomed and invited and know that even whether or not we provide the service that they need, we will 100% be partners in connecting with them with what they need. So again, that sometimes will include some of our digital resources, our wellness room I mentioned. We love our wellness room. We do have I talked about this stuff already. So here are some photos of it. And then just one final note, and I'll jump off. I know I'm a couple minutes over. This is a really important way that all of these holistic resources on our campus kind of get wrapped together. So we do have something called a care team, which is quite common for institutions here in the States. Sometimes it can be called a BIT team. And the idea here is an interdisciplinary group from all over campus comes together on a regular basis to coordinate support for students who are at risk in some ways based on mental health concerns. The goal is that students don't slip through the cracks, and also that students don't get overwhelmed by 20 people who are concerned, all trying to intervene at the same time. So the counseling center does not drive this team, but we are actively present in order to listen. Many times we can't necessarily share information about students because of confidentiality, but we can always give consultation and support and make sure that we're helping the campus think about how to support students well. That is my presentation. I apologize, I went a couple minutes over and I will step aside. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Irene, very much for your excellent talk. And actually, the model you presented is really comprehensive. And while listening to this very clear mapping, I realized how important it is to know who is doing what at the university and the institution, and really, you know, to notice that the functions would not overlap, so that you could know how to collaborate. And this aspect of collaboration, of course, is very, very important. So thank you very much for stressing it. And next we will hear Dr. David Walden, the director, staff psychologist, and lecturer at Counseling Center of Hamilton College. And he will present the role of a treatment model and wellness programming in student flourishing and staff satisfaction.
It's a mouthful, I know. It was a lot. Yeah, I want to say first, it's really nice to present with Irene and Tina, and thanks to Renata, thanks to you, Virginia, and thanks to Miroslav, who's translating into Lithuanian. I want to echo what Irene said. It feels, and it is, a very difficult time for a lot of things. And it's lovely to be able to join with you and talk about well-being and talk about flourishing. But it's also important for us to recognize just how hard and challenging the last several years have been, and certainly the last several months in your area of the world. And I'm also struck when I join anything international, I'm struck by the fact that almost everyone speaks English, or there's a translator who's working very hard to translate. And of course, most of us speak only one language. So thank you for joining us and being able to join us in our language. So I'm going to be talking about a similar sort of topic as Irene. I'll give you a little bit of background as I see it about the things that we're struggling with, at least in the United States, in terms of counseling center work and student wellness work. But my presentation is going to focus a little bit more on the inner workings of the counseling center. I think that systemic approach that Irene is talking about is incredibly important. And I can talk a little bit about our system here, but I'm primarily talking about the work that we're doing within the counseling center, because I'm beginning to realize that in a healthy system, in the counseling world as therapists, we should be able to focus on the actual therapy work, you know, among other things. So we certainly in our center do things other than psychotherapy, but I want to talk a little bit about how important it is to really focus in on that work from a treatment perspective. So this is a picture of our campus. We're situated on a lovely sort of natural rural setting. This is literally about a couple hundred feet outside of my office door. So we have some really nice parts on campus where we can go and reflect and turn inward a little bit. Some of the background to what it is that I want to talk about, the context of it. One piece is a great deal of increasing demand. So at least over here, what we're seeing in counseling centers is that over the last 5 to 7 years, the numbers of students that are coming into our doors are just vastly greater. For example, I've been at Hamilton for 14 years as the director of the counseling center, an assistant director, and a therapist. And when I came here, we saw in any given year, we have about 2,000 students. We saw maybe 100 or 150 students in a year 14 years ago. And last year we saw 800. So we've seen a really dramatic increase in the numbers of students seeking services. And that's true, at least over in the United States, that's true nationwide. We're also working in an environment where there are just much higher expectations on what we're providing, what the institution should provide students, what parents are expecting, what students are expecting. We're also seeing in the last couple of years, and maybe this is similar to what you've experienced being a human being in the world over the last couple of years, we're seeing a dramatic increase in burnout among mental health clinicians. So the way I think about this is just that, you know, as human beings, we like our stability. We like new things on vacation, you know, or when it's like a novel thing that we've bought or we got for our birthday or something like this. But we tend to like a predictable life. And so much of the last 2 years or so have been very unpredictable. And so a lot of our emotional and psychological bandwidth has been eaten up by the pandemic in particular. So we're seeing a lot of increased burnout in mental health providers in our system. And then the bigger picture, at least in the United States, is that institutions of higher education, colleges and universities, are playing a very different role in students' lives than they've ever played before. It used to be here, you know, if it was a long time ago, 100 or 150 years ago, it was the case that oftentimes institutions were kind of the parents away from home, right? And the institution was taking care of those students. But certainly in the late 1900s, we switched in higher education to a model where students were adults and they came here and they were responsible for themselves and so on and so forth. Well, now we're in a model where, again, colleges are expected to be very responsible for all aspects of students' well-being. And at least in the United States and some of the populations that we're dealing with, students and parents are expecting that to not experience discomfort or not experience problems in their college journey. So the role of higher education institutions has changed dramatically as well. So that's some of the context for what we're dealing with. Some challenges arise from that context. One challenge, as I see it, is how do we meet demand? Just the basic math problem of serving students. How do we see the number of people that are coming in our door? Second question, how do we provide meaningful services to those students? How do we not just have very quick touch points with every student that don't really mean anything? How do we do something that really impacts their well-being, that impacts their health in a meaningful and deep way? Because if we're not doing that, we're going to feel more burnt out as providers. Because we got into this work because we care about people and we want to help them. We didn't get into the work to just feel like we're doing nothing. So how do we provide meaningful services? And then along with that, how do we sustain our staff? How do we retain people in our field who want to do this work so that we don't have a lot of turnover? You know, we have a stable staff of clinicians. So these are some of the questions that I've been wrestling with, and these are some of the things that we've tried to address in our system. Generally speaking, in the United States, we're having a discussion around the model that counseling centers use for providing psychotherapy services, for providing our clinical services. On one end of the spectrum, on the left side of your screen, there's the access model or absorption model, depending on how you feel about it. And on the other end is a treatment model. In reality, most of us are somewhere in between, but it's clarifying to look at these two examples as ends of the spectrum that we can make decisions about. So on the access or absorption side, one answer to the problem of demand is to say, we're going to be driven by demand. We're going to give students quick access, rapid access to care, meaning we are going to have our clinicians always available. We're not going to schedule students out, and fill up spots. We're just going to have open availability all the time. We're not going to have any caseload limits. So you as a clinician will need to just sort of absorb or take on whoever comes your way. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's the idea of a treatment model that we're going to be driven by giving students regular appointments, maybe even when somebody comes in saying, okay, this is our weekly appointment. We're meeting on Wednesdays at 10 for the foreseeable future until you're done with therapy. This obviously preferences ongoing treatment, and usually in this model, caseloads are limited. So clinicians are only allowed to have so many clients so that they can schedule them weekly or every other week. Neither model is right or wrong, and the models really change depending on what your institution needs, but it's important to sort of look at these as options to choose from, or at least a mix of things to choose from. The key questions for me when thinking about these models are, what do the students at your institution need? Maybe the students at one institution need more ongoing care and treatment, and maybe at another institution they just need brief touch points to kind of meet, whatever their wellness needs are. What resources do you have in your area to refer to? We struggle with that in our area. We're a rural college, and we don't have a lot of places to refer to. And so there is a question there about what can we provide with what we have in the community. And then what do not just students want, but what do faculty want? What do upper administrators want at our colleges? What are the pressures that we feel at our institutions for where to go with our treatment model? At Hamilton, this is the building that I'm in. So we're on the top floor of that building, and you can see the background of what it looks like inside, which is a lovely space. We have about 2,000 undergraduate students. So this is just telling you a little bit about where I'm coming from. We have about 2,000 students. As Irene said, high touch is a word that we use a lot in the States. We are a high touch institution, meaning students expect quite a lot from us, and they want a good deal in terms of a positive relationship with us and with our providers. And we have very limited local resources. So that's what we're dealing with when we're making decisions about which model we go with. And we're also dealing with the fact that we are at our college heavily utilized. So last year, 41% of our student body used our counseling center, which is just incredibly high. The national average in the United States is about 14% or so, for 15%. So that 41% number is quite high. And in any graduating class of students here, it's not uncommon for 60% or more of those students to have come through our doors at some point. So what are they coming in with? This is similar to Irene's context, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but they're coming in with what you would expect, a lot of depression and anxiety. About 34% of our students, not just the clients that come into our counseling center, but our whole student population, present with some kind of clinical level of depression, about 31% with some kind of clinical level of anxiety. We do a study here called the Healthy Minds study. We do it every 2 years, and that's where this data is coming from. It's for our whole student population. About 12% of our students every year, or a little bit less now, have serious thoughts of suicide. And on our campus, almost 30% of our students experience some sort of cutting, burning, hitting, non-suicidal self-injury. And a great deal of our students endorse the statement that they currently need or want emotional or mental health help for problems. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I'll tell you a little bit about our model and how we've made choices in that, and how that model tries to wrap around students and help them with their well-being. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the impact that that model has had on our population. So the first thing that we do is we give students a choice of how they enter our system. We have traditional hour-long intakes. We also have 10 or 15-minute things where students can come in and just get a quick consultation with us. The key thing in our system is that is a choice. We don't force students into that, and they have a choice to make about how they want to enter our system. Do they want to invest the hour, or would they just like a brief assessment of what resources might be good for them? We also have a system that has caseload caps in our system. We limit our clinicians to a certain number of clients so that we preference a treatment model so that they can see people regularly. And if our clinicians are full, we make referrals as we can to the limited people in our community that we have. And we don't keep a wait list. So we don't have a long wait list of students waiting to see us. We just simply say we're full right now, and if you'd like to try and join us again later, you can. And then we provide a number of wellness services. So we split our services into the basic clinical services that you might expect. We offer individual therapy, group therapy, psychiatric services, a dietitian, those primary clinical services. And then we offer a number of wellness services along with that. One of those is something called, these are creative things that we do. One of those is called mindful music. That's at the top right picture. We have a musician, a songwriter from Nashville. Her name's Ann Buckle. She's a relative of Johnny Cash, if you know that musician. She's a younger cousin of June Carter Cash and Johnny Cash. And she does a thing for us called mindful music, where students who maybe don't want traditional therapy can go and join her session and write a song about their breakup or their relationship with their mom or their journey as a first-year student, whatever it might be. So we offer a couple of those a week. We've tried a group format. You can see a picture of that there. And now we've moved into an individual format because people felt like they needed a little bit of privacy in that space. And then Anne and I talk about the therapy side of it. And I supervise her and provide a little bit of context for how the work is a little clinical in some ways that she's doing. So we offer that. We also offer something called Community Pantry and Baker's Cupboard. That's the picture on the left. We give students on our campus boxes of vegetables and ingredients to make a meal. And then we do a Zoom cook-along with them. Once they get those boxes of ingredients, when they're back in their residence hall, we cook along with them, and our dietitian, who's in that picture, leads those. And we use that as a way to talk about mental health topics. So we don't do that really hard, heavy-handedly, but we will talk about, a student says, how much of the tomato should I put in the soup, And we talk about how flexibility is important and how you can make your own choices and be creative about life. And you don't need to, have everything be so, written out, right? And let's apply that to your schoolwork or so on and so forth. So we talk about that. We also have something called mindful pottery, where students are engaging in mindfulness meditation and then literally making pots and making, bowls and things like that. And we use that as an opportunity to talk about how we often get distracted from tasks by anxiety and and how being present and being focused in the moment can be very helpful towards producing something beautiful. So we do that. We also have, similar to Irene, we loan out full spectrum lights and weighted blankets, and we've begun loaning out sound machines now because everybody's doing Zoom therapy. So they're doing it from their room. We loan out a sound machine so they can have privacy in their room to make it easier to Zoom. And next year, we've been doing all virtual services. Next year, when we do in-person, we're going to pull back in some additional wellness services like an acupuncturist, a little bit of yoga therapy, so movement therapy. We'll pull those in. We do those in group formats, but once we go back to in-person, we'll pull those services back in as well. So we have our clinical services, and then we have our wellness services within the center. And then we also contract with some outside providers. So our crisis services are done by a company called Protocol, so that our staff isn't up at 2 o'clock in the morning responding to students. And then we partner with Mantra Health and Better Mind, who are two outside agencies that have clinicians that we pay for to deal with some overflow and referral issues, since we don't have a lot of referral here. We also use Mantra to broaden our pool of providers. Since we're in a rural area, it's hard to hire people to come here. And so we broaden it a little bit with those companies. So that's a little bit about kind of our services. The key piece there for me is that we're focusing on two things. We're focusing on providing treatment from the licensed mental health providers in our system, which is what they're trained to do and what they've learned to do. It helps them feel less burnt out because they're doing the work that they were trained to do. And then we're also providing these sort of wraparound wellness services to get at mental health in a broader way. The impact on our population has been interesting. What you're seeing here on these next slides is Hamilton's on the left, that's our institution, and then our peer institutions on the right. So you'll notice that symptoms are going up over time. That's a national trend, that symptoms are going up over time. But what you'll notice is that our levels of symptoms, though they were higher than our peers in the past, since we've moved to a treatment model, they're now lower than our peers. So in other words, rates are going up nationally, but our rates are going up, this is bad grammar, less high. I can't think of the better way to say it. They're not going up as fast as our peers. And I think that's because of our treatment model and because of the ancillary wellness services that we're offering. So this is the slide for depression, which is less than the peers. This is for anxiety, which again, going up less than peers, even though at times we've been pretty much the same. Suicidal ideation has actually gone down a little bit. I know it's a very small percent, but it's gone down a little bit for us. And more importantly, our rates of stigma, Hamilton's in the light blue, our peers are in the dark blue. The rate of stigma is about not quite a half of our peers, but the rate of judging mental illness is much less here now because of what we're doing. And also students on our campus really know where to find the right resources compared to peers. Still very high at peer institutions, but 92% is really good. So we're seeing some impacts on our population. I think similar to what Irene talked about, and this is what I'll close out with, but similar to what she talked about, this is the interior of our waiting room space. One of the things that we're really paying attention to is the larger framework within which we're situated. So it feels really, really important, at least in the United States, students are beginning to talk about everything as mental health. Everything has become mental. And I don't know if it's the same for you all, but everything is mental health. I think this, as a world community, we have a lot more language to talk about different aspects of our identity than we had 20, 30, 50 years ago, right? So certainly in the United States, maybe in other countries as well, there's a lot more language to talk about our sexual orientation or our gender identity, right? Similarly, I think in the last several years, we've gotten a lot more language to talk about our internal states. It's a lot more valid now when you see someone to say, how are you doing? And to, mostly we go, good, how are you? Good. But it's a lot more valid now to say, oh, I'm depressed today, or I'm feeling, I was depressed last week. Oh, I'm pretty anxious about this presentation I'm giving, or something. We have a lot more language around that. So to the extent that students saying everything is mental health means that they're using that language and it's more valid to talk about what's going on inside of them as human beings, that's great, fantastic, right? The extent to which that means everything needs a licensed clinician, not great, not good, because there aren't enough licensed clinicians. So similar to what Irene said, we're focusing on a larger framework. We want the counseling center to do what they do best, which is provide treatment and provide some of these really creative and interesting wellness services. But then we want the larger framework at the college to have that students of concern. We call it student support care team here. We want other units at the college to be offering, in some senses, mental health, I put quotes, treatment, right? We want them to be offering things that make sense. So more creative wellness efforts from other parts of the college Just yesterday, I had an email with our outdoor leadership people saying, why don't we loan out, students want this, why don't we loan out hammocks during nice weather? And we'll call it, are you anxious? Are you feeling depressed? Go pick up a hammock and go sit in the sun for a while. And let's legitimize that as a way to take care of your mental health. So we want that. And then we want other parts of our system to be functioning well. Our student support care team, which is a non-clinical case management team. We just hired a health promotion director to work on the overall health of our students, right? So we want that overall system to be strong as well. And then we want the counseling center folks to do what they do best. So that's sort of how we're thinking about things and how we're trying to move a little bit what we would call upstream. So we're not just reacting. So if I can use a little bit more, I'll just say some lessons from our system. One, there's challenge everywhere in the world. We can't avoid that. So when we approach challenge, it's important to be consistent about what we do. We have a tendency to react and respond immediately to things, but we need to be thinking long-term about what's sustainable, because otherwise we're going to lose our clinicians, we're going to lose people who are doing really good work. On our campus, at least, treatment is working. We have less student complaints. That mental health issue is seen more appropriately. And I think at least nowadays, it's really important to consider burnout in staff and important to consider flexible work. We do remote work here. We allow our people to work remotely 2 days a week so they can be at home and be comfortable when they're doing their work, because our emotional bandwidth is an important thing to maintain. And I just would love to end by re-emphasizing how we started, which is that this picture reminds us we're all living on this little tiny rock out in space. These days it feels like people are, especially in your part of the world, focused on hurting each other. And I'm reminded of the idea that when we take care of ourselves, we're taking care of one cell in a global body. When we take care of ourselves, we're taking care of one cell in a global body. And so it's very important for us to recognize that the work we do has an impact. And the work we do taking care of ourselves has an impact, because when we're taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of that whole world. And we're taking care of that one person, and then we help them take care of themselves. They're also taking care of the whole world. And so I just want to put that in context. It's important for us to celebrate those small achievements, especially when times are hard. So that is my piece, and I really am glad to be able to share it with you, and happy to turn it back over.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. It was very, very interesting to listen to you. Yeah, this introduction of the treatment approach you are using was really informative, and I was very impressed about the 41% of students which have access to your services. Because we here, at least at Vilnius University, we do have 23,000 undergraduate students, and we can provide services only to up to 2% of them. So, just comparing the numbers, not how to say, not so easy. But anyway, we have to move to our third presentation, and that talk would be provided by Tina Wathwa, the Director of Student Success and Wellbeing at New York University, but in a very exotic location in Abu Dhabi. So her presentation will be on student success and well-being, an integrative approach to helping students thrive at university and beyond. So please, Tina.
Thank you so much. And I am so sorry for being a little bit late. It's the end of our workday, and so I was wrapped up in meetings, but I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to hear the tail end of David's presentation, because it really flows nicely into what I plan on talking about. So let me just give me a moment while I share my screen. We've been doing Zoom long enough that this should be easier for me, but I still have not mastered it. So bear with me. All right, do you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let me just put it on slideshow. Perfect. Okay, And so as was shared, I work at New York University, but in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. And this is a relatively new university. It started in 2010, and it was really born out of an idea the president of NYU New York had, to expand sort of a global network of education for students. Just to give you all a little bit of background, because it is such a new institution, it's small. We have 1,800 students currently. It is really grown over the 12 years that we've been here. And our students come from over 110 different countries, and they speak over 75 languages. They all have to have sort of a certain level of English speaking skills because our courses are taught in English. But it just to show just the real deep diversity of an institution like NYU Abu Dhabi, and how, we're going to talk a little bit about how that plays into our well-being support. So let me see. I really love this quote, and I wish I knew who said it. I've come across it a few times, but it's always unknown. For students to do well, they must be well. And so to David's point, this idea of, the generation currently, this idea of mental health is such a buzzword. And you see it on social media, you see it with students coming in and talking about, that they're having a mental health crisis. At least that's what we see often. The pandemic made things so much worse. And it's not meant to minimize that the experiences that they're feeling are not mental health, but it's, as student affairs professionals, our division falls under student affairs, which is a very US-centric term, US-centric model. We're really looking at students and helping support them holistically. And what we notice is that they really turn to the counseling support. Even though we are so diverse, and quite frankly, when I started at NYU Abu Dhabi about 8 years ago, I was surprised. I thought there would be a little bit more stigma related to mental health, because I know many cultures across the globe, there is stigma associated with it. But what I find very interesting is that the college students that we interact with, they seem to really gravitate towards counseling support. And what we did initially at the university was really direct our students to counseling supports. And what we're realizing now is that there are much stronger, more effective supports to help them build their holistic well-being and help them thrive outside of just NYU Abu Dhabi. So I thought it would be useful for me to kind of go back in time and talk about pre-pandemic. So this is early 2020. And we had a number of mental health and well-being supports available to students. And so some might be more obvious, like the counseling center or health promotions, which at the time I was overseeing. But there are other ways that students can sort of build their holistic well-being. So they can, through career development, through athletics and fitness, through understanding sort of their global education that they have access to at NYU New York, NYU Abu Dhabi, where students have an opportunity to study away 2 or 3 semesters within our global network. We have portal sites in universities across the globe. And so at the time, pre-pandemic, and I think the pandemic exacerbated it, these were very siloed opportunities for students to engage in their well-being. So if they were stressed out or overwhelmed about their future career, then they would visit the career development center, but they might also visit the counseling center, or they might also realize that exercise might help their well-being, but it wasn't coordinated in any way. And so what we noticed was happening was that there were really different messages that students were receiving about what their well-being was. Some of the messages were unintentionally damaging. And so maybe they would go to the fitness center and learn about nutrition, and they would go to health promotions and learn something very different about nutrition. And that would really impact sort of their understanding of what to do. And it reduced credibility across our division of student affairs, where students were really getting different messages. Again, a very siloed approach. And I would also say just over programming. We have colleagues across the institution that were doing similar programmings, and we're reducing the number. And then, as David highlighted, people were really burning out. Our staff were overextended, and students felt like that decision fatigue of where do I go to? There are all these offerings, and we're a small institution, but because there is a startup mentality, there is an energy to produce, to create more opportunities for students. What else? What's going to stick? And so we had, I think, like kind of this awakening in over the pandemic and realizing that we can be doing things smarter and we can be doing things more effectively. And just to give you a little bit of background, health promotions, which is an area that I founded at NYU Abu Dhabi 8 years ago, really worked and continues to work with students to access what their mental health and well-being needs are, really with an emphasis on mental health. My training is in counseling. My background is in counseling. And so that's really the lens in which I was accessing health promotions. And then I've hired over the years colleagues that have much more diverse expertise, and we're able to provide a more holistic idea of promoting health and well-being. We also require our students to take a number of mandatory initiatives that are geared at fostering shared understanding around sort of mutual care and respect. So that might look like alcohol education. And for those of you who might not know about the UAE and the Middle East, but there are really strict laws around alcohol use when students are either Muslim, or if they're on, or people are Muslim, or if they're on a student visa. Yet we really take a harm reduction approach to a lot of these efforts, which is very unique in the region, as well as training our students around sexual misconduct and consent education. We built out a bystander intervention training to really meet the needs of our community. I think what we've done here is really taking best practices in the US, because that's where many of us from student affairs come from, though we are diversifying, thank goodness, over the years, but really tailoring it to meet the unique needs of our diverse community. We do something called life skills, which is our way of providing a mandatory holistic well-being education to students that includes things like nutrition, exercise, the benefits of exercise and mental health, again, more consent education, as well as sexual health education. With many of what we realized over the years is that students were not well versed around their sexual health, and that was really impacting their overall well-being, their overall health. So those were just some of them. You can see them here on the left, that is a current life cycle for our students. We also host a number of initiatives like, Mental Health Awareness Week, Redesigning Success Week, and then First Gen College Celebration. And we take a really inclusive approach to how we define First Gen at NYU Abu Dhabi. So students really self-select into that, really thinking about, does their college experience, which even though we are in the UAE, it feels very Western. It feels like a very US university in many ways. It's a residential university. Does, do they, even if their parents did go to a 4-year university, was it vastly different from NYU Abu Dhabi? And has that impacted their experience here, their ability to sort of understand how to navigate college life? I also oversee a peer support group called REACH, Raising Empowered Advocates for Community Help. They're a group of 8 to 10 students who really get trained intensively on how to do peer counseling. We have learned so in so many different ways how important the peer-to-peer approach is. I think I'm really cool, and I think
Excuse me, Tina, sorry for interrupting you, but I received a message from the interpreter, because we have the translation to Lithuanian, that you talk a bit too quickly. So
I do, yeah. And I will slow down. And you gave me that. I knew that in the email, and I think I just needed a reminder. So I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
So we have our peer-to-peer counseling support group, and they are a group of students that we select, 8 to 10, and they receive very intensive training to provide peer-to-peer counseling to the community, as well as to oversee workshops around mental health, around consent, around nutrition, around fitness, around redesigning success. We have an initiative called Failures Anonymous. We want to encourage students to accept failure, and that we can fail forward, that it's a part of our growth, is failing at things, and to give things a try. We have our students are very high achieving. They're usually top of their class in high school. They're usually a big fish in a small sea, and they come here and they're a small fish in a bigger sea, and they struggle with that imposter syndrome. And so we really try to tackle that. We've been really effective in our peer-to-peer approach. We use students as much as possible. We use them to help assess our programs. We use them to help design our programs. We use them to help receive feedback, because we find that feedback loops are much stronger when it's peer-to-peer than if they're trying to answer a survey from us. If it goes out from Reach, we see a higher return rate. So we've learned a lot through our peer-to-peer engagement. So I want to go back to my slide a few minutes ago about what we were our siloed approach that we were experiencing, that was very heightened when we were all working from our homes. What we were also noticing, and this was even pre-pandemic, that many of our students were not reaching their potential. We had, especially over the pandemic, a high rate of failing students. And that was really surprising to both our senior administrators as well as our government partners. While we have very robust services at NYU Abu Dhabi, there was no office really aimed at providing holistic support with an effort to connect well-being to academics. Faculty and staff were often tasked with work outside of their scope, and so they were asked to step in areas that they didn't have an expertise. So again, that was maybe impacting the work, but also impacting their well-being and their feelings of feeling overwhelmed by the work. Counseling services were deeply overwhelmed. We often benchmark our institution against smaller liberal arts institutions in the US, but we also have NYU New York and NYU Shanghai. And the number of counselors to students at NYU Abu Dhabi is very high, yet our counselors were more overburdened. And the counseling is great for clinical support, mental health, serious mental health needs, but wasn't really addressing some of the executive functioning skills that we want our students to build as young adults. We recognize that our marginalized community members and our first-gen students were not reaching out for support, and that holistic well-being was not being addressed institutionally. So maybe in pockets, but because there wasn't that one sort of person holding that, it wasn't addressed institutionally. So that is when we formed a new department that I oversee called Student Success and Wellbeing. And that department, we have 3 functional areas within it. So we have health promotions again, and I've been able to promote someone within my team to really oversee that area. We have a new functional area that started in the fall called Student Success. And then we are building out and currently hiring for, so if anyone is looking for a position, well-being, which is really going to focus on non-Western ways to engage in our well-being. Because I am American, I'm South Asian American, and because our student affairs team tends to be very US-centric, we realize a very significant gap that we are not addressing from, we do things like yoga and meditation and mindfulness. However, we're not deeply getting into some of the Eastern practices that could be supporting our students and could be accessing them in a different way. So that's still very, that hasn't been built out yet, but that will be the next academic year. We hope to have someone overseeing that area. And I'll go through this pretty quickly, but we did a number of focus groups to really identify what the areas were that we needed to address with student success. And our coaching addresses combating imposter syndrome, setting goals. I think we take for granted that students know what goal setting is, but really mapping out how do you set goals and track whether you're meeting your goals. Learning the difference between studying in high school versus studying in university, and helping them understand how what exam prep looks like. Identifying what the barriers are for them to learn the material. And those barriers aren't always skills based. It could be something going on with their family back home. It could be something going on with relationships at university. It could be imposter syndrome. It could be a number of things. navigating the college classroom. So as I mentioned, our students come from all over the globe. And so the professor-student dynamic might have looked really different to them in high school. And so helping them learn how to read a syllabus, how to understand a syllabus, how to utilize office hours, managing their time more effectively, as I said, communicating with their faculty, and helping them design what success means to them. You know, the term success is a very loaded term, but the department really takes the approach that students should have agency to design and define what success means to them, and then we work backwards to help them get there. The department really, the key tenets of the department, we want to be strength-based and personalized. We really utilize the data. That is not something NYU Abu Dhabi has been great at previously, but really accessing data to identify students that could be at risk and working with them to find out what we could do to support them. We are proactive and intrusive coaching model. That means that we don't wait for students to come to us. We really reach out to them. We meet them where they're at. We meet them in the dining hall. We meet them in the residence hall. We want to connect with them, let them know that we are here for support. We're not here for judgment. Very user-friendly and cultivating a sense of belonging. I think at the core, what we have recognized, and I don't think this is necessarily unique to NYU Abu Dhabi, but I think this is something that I always come back to, is that a sense of belonging is paramount to success in any aspect of your life. And so when students haven't had a space to cultivate that sense of belonging, it impacts their academic journey. It impacts their ability to form relationships with others. It impacts their self-esteem, and it impacts their mental health. So that really undergirds the work of the department. We want to, this little bar needs to be moved, sorry. So our goals for a more holistic approach, really strategic collaboration, shared messaging, capacity building for students, but also for staff, and thinking about the whole student. And I'm not aware of time, but I'm gonna try to go through something that I think has been really successful over the last academic year. Is we created a student success stakeholders meetings. And this is an opportunity where we went into individual students. We meet weekly, and we come together to identify students that are either, very clearly at risk, but also identify students that are not at risk, but there has been a change in behavior, either identified from their faculty member. Our students are in generally small classes. Faculty get to know them well, or maybe identified by their coach, maybe identified by other colleagues across the institution or other students. And we discuss them. We discuss them one by one. We strategize around what they might need. We create an action plan, and we assign a member to follow up. We utilize Starfish as an online platform to increase our organization around the students we discuss, as well as to hold our colleagues accountable for following up with students. And I just listed here all the people that come to this meeting, because I think it's really important to see how high level it is. It's a vice provost for undergraduate academic development, vice provost for academic affairs, assistant vice provost of academic education, associate vice chancellor of student affairs. We have a representative from the registrar. Our dean of students comes, all of our associate and assistant deans, and my student success team. And what's really valuable about that space is that we are having decision makers in the room, and we've been able to shift policy and procedures to create protocols that haven't existed institutionally, to be able to say, this is not equitable for our students. We need to write this down somewhere. How do we deal with this student who parent just passed away from COVID and they've missed their deadline to drop their class? How do we want to manage this? And how do we really think equitably that if another student comes forward with a similar issue, but it's their grandparent, how are we going to address that? So we get into the weeds a bit about how to navigate individual situations, and then we really try to write things down to make sure that moving forward, we are being equitable, we're being thoughtful, and we're creating something that when we all leave, we will eventually leave, that there will be something that people can fall back on. Lessons learned is that we still have a whole lot to do. It's been 1 year, and we have learned that counselors are not the only option for mental health concerns. I think that reiterates David's David's point, that there are so many people and individuals that with the right training and the right access can support our students holistically. This meeting that I discussed is the first space at NYU Abu Dhabi where faculty, students, advisors have come together to tangibly discuss individual students in an effort to support them holistically. The conversations that we have around this meeting are really beautiful. We have the coach who is an assistant dean of the football team say, you know, I know that student, and did you know XYZ about them? Did you know that the whole pandemic, they were teaching their younger sibling, and so they couldn't get to their courses? Let me have that conversation with them. So we're really leveraging the relationships that we have to help students get the support that they need. Equity must be considered when it comes to each and every student. That is something we have learned. That's something that we try to be really great at, and we always need to check ourselves. We have also learned that early intervention for students provides a powerful opportunity to really change the course of their life. We have seen when we intervene early with a student, when they think they're not good enough, when they think that they shouldn't be at NYU Abu Dhabi, when they're thinking about dropping off, if we're able to build their skills and support them, that we can, you know, really have an impact on them. We have to be, you know, in such a diverse place, but I would argue anywhere, really curious about students' cultures and their communities and their support structures, and how can we leverage those? How can we support those to help them thrive? And that a transformational connection is worth the investment. You know, it takes much more time than a transactional experience with a student, but it really allows for a deeper understanding of what's impacting them. And when you share the load, as we've been able to do, you're able to dig a lot deeper to understand the individual students. And what we do is that we have students assigned to deans based on their alphabet. And so this dean will follow them all 4 years, because they will always, unless they get married, they will and change their name, they will always have the same last name. And then an unresponsive student is often the sign of something else. I think we've learned that they're not just ambivalent. They're not just there because they're not just being, you know, dodging your question. They're probably dealing with something larger, and that it's our duty to sort of dig deeper. And I say that knowing that there might be some people on the call that says, isn't that too much hand-holding? And we get that sometimes, like, are we setting these students up for success in the future? And we really come from the point that we are here to support them now and build skills, not to handhold. We want to build skills, whether it's, you know, a number of things, so that they can thrive outside of our walls as well, so that they have a tool belt that they can turn to, so they can be successful, well-rounded individuals. And I don't know if I went over time, but I apologize if I did. And I wasn't able to look at the chat box, but I hope that that was valuable for you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your excellent talk. And while listening, I thought that maybe quite many higher education institutions find themselves in the situation you described in your presentation. And I think that, you know, you just provided a really nice takeaway messages, you know, at least where to start, what to think of, and what kind of ideas can be implemented. So I think that we almost ran out of the time, but still, I would like to thank all the 3 speakers, because I think that it was really, truly phenomenal talk that we have heard today. And I would like to pass the final word for my colleague Xenia.
Thank you, Virginia. Yes, I am also very impressed by all the presentations, and we still have several minutes maybe for live questions, if anybody would like to ask, because there were some in chat. So we don't have time to read them, but I think that all of them were answered. Feel free, please, to raise your hand or just turn on your microphone and ask our presenters or anything you would like to hear about. Okay. I see no reactions, but still I think that there are lots of impressions, because lots of information and very interesting ideas we have heard. I think some of them may be implemented, and I am so happy that we can share such a good practice from all over the world. And I would like to remind that each of participants will get the link to this webinar. And maybe if there will be some questions, they would contact you in person. We're still with the team, Embrace team, we're still having some webinars coming, international webinars, and you can see, we will inform on the timetable of them on our website, on the website of the Embrace project. So just to remind you, the link, it's www.embracehe.org. I see some reactions in chat. Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your contacts for people, with people who work in higher education systems. So thank you so much. And
okay, so thank you very much, and you will find all the questions and answers as well as comments in the recorded version of the webinar. And I hope that we will meet in the next webinars mentioned by Ksenia. Thank you very much for attending. It was very nice to see you all here. And have a nice day, evening, I don't know, yeah, because we have different time zones each in our country.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks
very
a
much.
lot.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Bye.